Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for participating in our session today. I'm Jane Abel, Vice President of Student Services at Copper Mountain College. So we are a small rural college in Joshua Tree, and with being a small institution, it comes with some great wins, like great collaboration and unsiloing with an effort and a framework like guided pathways. It also comes with some challenges, namely resources, because, well, we just don't have them. And so that's a struggle for small schools. But we've come far in this process from where we started 4 years ago. And now we're scaling guided pathways institution-wide and doing our best to make the experience better and more accessible for students. With relentless clarity throughout the whole process, so that it's clear and reducing barriers for students, because that's what we want. And speaking of collaboration, how we've structured our pathways work was with student services, with the student services faculty lead and instructional faculty lead, because we know that it's the whole experience from start to finish, and that we're working to enhance all of our processes for students. And we know that the cross-functional involvement is super important. So presenting with me today, or who's doing most of the presentation today, is Crystal Avila, who is our counseling faculty lead, who has been our counseling faculty lead, I think, for most of the time here, and Melanie Scheel, who was our former instructional faculty lead and who has since become our VP of Academic Affairs. And so they will be presenting on how we are institutionalizing and organizing our college around pathways. And since they did most of the heavy lifting, I am going to send it on over to them. So take it away.
Okay, so here at CMC, we had a bit of a slow start in the sense that we were not looking at guided pathways as being institutionalized in the beginning. The focus really was on the work in student services, specifically with counseling. As one of the leads, I could easily see how we could get started with the advising pieces with just a few adjustments. We really focused on clarifying the path and entering the path by beginning the mapping of all degrees. To begin this work, counseling hosted a flex session where we explained the student education plan in great detail and the importance of general education, along with the differences in the transfer patterns. We then asked discipline faculty to choose the best general education courses to fit within each of their majors. After we collected the worksheets from the session, each faculty lead met with me individually to finalize the map. We had great discussions about double counting and why faculty chose the GE courses that they chose. This information we found super valuable, and we relate it to the other counselors, so it could be used during our student education plan meetings. The effort really allowed us to start breaking down the silos between student services and academic affairs. So mapping worked great for students who knew what they wanted to major in, but for those who did not, we began working on pathways of interest, or our meta majors. We went to Senate with a draft of where counseling saw programs fit together. In just one meeting, we developed 5 pathways: STEM, CTE, business, arts and humanities, and social and behavioral. And instructional faculty took time to discuss where they felt each program fell under. The pathways of interest were seen merely as an advising tool for counselors to use at this point.
I had to unmute myself. So Copper Mountain College has 40 full-time faculty with 29 instructional faculty. And for the purposes of program review and accreditation, our programs are currently defined as programs of study and have been defined like that since our 2013 accreditation cycle. So in many cases, programs are overseen by and program reviews are completed by teams of 1. So the approach taken by individual faculty in completing program reviews and in completing program learning outcome assessments varied across programs. So just a moment ago, we were talking about pathways of interest, and now all of a sudden I'm talking about program reviews and program learning outcomes. But what we realized is that we were taking a pretty narrow approach in this instructional area where we just focus on what's in our classrooms and what's in our programs. And so we started to think about the pathways as a concept for program improvement. So student progress outside of classroom success and possibly program completion has not been systematically captured or discussed in program reviews. So as we work through the scale of adoption assessment, which I'm sure most of the people on the call are very used to and probably love the scale of adoption assessment, program review popped up time and time again as the appropriate time and place to address the whole student's journey as it relates to the instructional areas and to integrate the information that we can receive from student services. So, and I want to mention to the group, we would like you to feel free to ask us questions if something pops into your mind as we're going through the presentation. We're very comfortable with even stopping one another to say, oh, there's a great question that applies to what you're talking about. So please don't hesitate. So what we needed to do was to take a closer look at where and when the pathways could be incorporated into our work and the focus of instructional faculty. And the organizational structure of academic affairs was mapped out. We have right now 2 deans and 3 division chairs and 3 student learning outcome assessment coordinators. And like Jane mentioned, we're small and we don't have department chairs, and many of our programs have single individual faculty. So when we mapped out our structure and we overlaid it with our pathways, we noticed some interesting stuff. So when in my role as a faculty co-lead for guided pathways, I had prepared a presentation showing how close our pathways of interest were to our existing academic affairs structure. And I had discussed the concept with the leads team, which was at the time Jane, our prior CIO, and Crystal, and then I was the instructional lead at the time. And then I took a presentation to the Academic Senate. And the context of the presentation was to discuss how pathways applies in instruction and to address some long-standing challenges with our program review structure. So we wanted to figure out a way to engage our faculty in program review and in program learning outcome assessment. So there are a number of faculty here on campus who are not able to, well, they're able to, but they don't necessarily participate in program review because our programs are defined as programs of study. So it's like we don't have a philosophy program. So our philosophy professor, our one full-time philosophy professor, doesn't engage in program review dialogue or program learning outcome assessment dialogue. And so we were trying to figure out a way to make that work. So the discussion resonated with many of the heavy lifters in the Academic Senate, needing to improve on learning outcome assessment for accreditation, and also wanting to improve on our program review collaboration. People were like, let's take a look at how this pathways structure could possibly work for us. This is where it got interesting. The entire presentation that I took to the Academic Senate was based on the wrong pathways of interest document. And so everybody was excited, and then I had used the wrong pathways. But what that did was we started to say, wait a second, how will pathways work for the rest of our organization? How can it help our structure? And so we thought, if we're going to potentially align to pathways, let's take another look at what the pathways are and see if they really make sense for students. And it started a very long dialogue for us in terms of improvement. So the concept though resonated, and we began to discuss pathways once again, and we came up with the decision to revamp, to rebuild our pathways of interest before moving forward, because finally everybody was interested in how it applied far beyond student services.
So like Melanie said, it really became apparent to us that instructional faculty were not invested in the previously adopted, or what we thought was the previously adopted pathways of interest. In Academic Senate, we started having conversations with a new lens. We now had the Guided Pathways framework in the forefront. This led us to re-look at the pathways of interest to make sure it wasn't just seen as an advising tool, but that there was broad institutional applicability. So we got the endorsement from the Senate for an overhaul of the pathways of interest, and then we really began the hard work. We made sure that the conversations involved advising, student guidance, student success and equity review, program review, dialogue, and program learning outcome assessment. Our goal was to make Guided Pathways the center of our work. So in order to make sure we were successful in the reorganization, we looked at what our students were declaring as their major and what their graduating major was. We were looking to see where we should focus our efforts and what path the students were taking. We took this information to Senate and received additional feedback. We then sent out an all-campus survey asking for feedback on the proposal, which included open-ended questions. It was important to us to get the feedback from all the constituency groups. Finally, we had several breakout sessions over Flex Week to further our conversations. And ultimately, we adopted these as our 7 pathways of interest.
So revisiting our pathways of interest was initiated because the dialogue about how pathways would be used was understood to expand well beyond just advising at that point. So it was a very lively dialogue. When we finalized the new pathways of interest, along with that action item, the Academic Senate also endorsed the concept to recommend aligning our reporting structure to the pathways, as well as defining pathways as programs for the purpose of program reviews. So the first step was okay, let's take a vote on the pathways of interest and endorse or request academic affairs to shift the faculty around so that we are ready to do the guided pathways work in reporting structures that are the same as the guided pathways structure. This circled us back to where we started the conversation with improved instructional faculty engagement, since the pathways now had tremendous effect on how work processes would change going forward. So just as a note, along the way, there were discussions about how many of our program areas serve students in other pathways. That was absolutely true. And the idea is ultimately for our program reviews to reflect service and success in the major and across campus for those areas that support general education. So this also leads to better pathway emphasis opportunity for our student success teams and other guided pathway work. Every faculty member will know which pathway they fall into, and they will be part of the student success team in some way. We're working with NCII as well on our student success teams. So with our 7 pathways of interest, the alignment of our organizational structure to support pathways requires only a few changes. And we were lucky that way. So our child development program will move to a different dean and division. Our EMT, psychology, sociology, cultural geography, and anthropology will shift division chairs. And a couple of other programs are captured in multiple pathways. So we have a few decisions that need to be made about reporting structure and about how the full-time faculty in disciplines that fit into multiple pathways, how their work process will flow. So at the end goal is to have a program review by pathway that engages all of the faculty, even those who may not have been engaged before. So this is just an image showing how our alignment worked out. And before the shift and before the addition of the change in the pathways from our 5 to our 7, the boxes that you see where it says CTE division chair or coordinator of health sciences, those boxes didn't directly support the pathway. They might have crossed over a little bit. So it's just getting straight alignment so that when we have a discussion about the applied technology pathway, we know we're going to have those faculty, the specific division chair, the SLOAC for the CTE division, And then the oversight and responsibility for supporting the faculty in the pathway, for supporting the students in the pathway, will be with the Associate Dean of CTE and non-credit. So we have this graphic to show, and we only have 2 deans, so it's probably crazy to some of you guys on the call, but and then we have this graphic to show the Dean of Arts and Sciences and how that lines up. So each of the deans has pathways that they're responsible for and that they will be supporting the faculty in.
So as far as next steps for our institution, we're working with the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement, and I know all of you heard Rob Johnstone speak this morning, and so he is helping us out. And our 3 focus areas for design are first, the student success teams by pathways. So we did some of this work previously, but like with a few other things on our campus, we are doing a 2.0 of this. And as Crystal mentioned, in the beginning, it was student services centered. And so it was, we were working solely through student services functions for these design teams. And we realized again that it would be more effective around this new whole institutional program structure. And the next one is an equity-focused program review, doing the documents by pathway. So our academic senate has agreed to defining programs as pathways, as mentioned, and to the revision of our program review process and template to reflect this framework. So we're taking a hard look at disproportionate impacts and equity metrics through each program. And the third one is the pathway emphasis on career exploration and placement for all students, for all areas, not just CTE. We have pockets of programs, mostly in CTE, with this career information, exploration, and outreach in place. But we know that all programs lead to careers, and we're working to make sure that this is the case for all programs. And the next, our Ed Master Plan is being revised to overlay with this guided pathways framework and structure, so that our Ed Master Plan will be essentially also be a guided pathways document. So that's really exciting. And we're working through discussions on the viability of program learning outcomes as pathways, and having conversations with Academic Senate in regards to assessing program outcomes of degrees and certificates. So that's some of the work going on for us right now.
Before we move on, are there any questions about the information that we shared so far? I think we went through kind of quickly, but anything that we can drill down further from the group? All right, so we will move on. Is there anything in the chat, Jane?
No, not at this time.
Not yet. Okay. So the Pathways Summit provided for us a set of questions to answer in our presentation. And the first question has, how has this improved the student experience? And so for us, this is a structure change that we're working on implementing now. And it's really very much phased in. The first phase of the structure change is just to move a few faculty around and make sure that our reporting structure is in alignment with the guided pathways work and focus that we want to have. How this will improve the campus experience, because it gets everybody on the same page of working within the idea and the concept of pathways. So you know, in the instructional world, a student's path is oftentimes just when you enter my class and you exit my class, and that's the path that, you know, me as an instructor, when I was working in the classroom, that's the path that I mostly see. And so this is giving us an opportunity to take a step back and have the whole campus approach students on their entire path. So we can't say that it has directly improved the student experience at this moment because we're implementing it, but we most definitely anticipate that the focus in this way and the engagement across instruction and advising will definitely improve our students' experience. You're muted, Jane.
So how's this addressed or improved racial equity on campus? And as I mentioned, one of our design teams is specifically working on exactly this, and we've restructured the programs with the student equity in mind. And so whenever we do this, we want to keep an equity lens. What does this look like for, our disproportionately impacted students? And doing this will allow us to have more focused data on cohorts and address specifically with intention the areas where there are disproportionate impacts.
And what role did data play in our effort? So I think I mentioned this in my piece that we looked at what students declared as their major and what their actual major was when they were graduating. And we use that in revising our student pathways of interest. And then as program reviews by pathways is better developed, equity focused student data will be the central focus in that.
As far as student engagement, students have been involved in guided pathways discussions since the beginning. The pathways of interest discussions were held with student involvement. We went to quite a few ASCMC or our associated students meetings in the beginning to gain insight from students, and the application of the organizational structure to students. It was through student success, through the pathways, was discussed with student government. So they have been involved. They are in, all of our meetings, involved in as a group in our college functions, and so we will have continued dialogue with students, and we have included them since the beginning because that's what's important, the student experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last question, this really applies to us. If you haven't integrated these ideas in your work yet, because we are in the middle of implementation of our modified structure, what recommendations, or how will we integrate them? And then what recommendations do we have for others to employ in the future? So implementation is ongoing for our structure discussion. It came about when we were looking at our pathways, and it really helped people engage in the pathways dialogue. But the first step is simply just organizational. It's just, who reports to who and who has oversight of faculty disciplines. And those disciplines are set up in such a way that they align to the pathways. So that's step one, and that's really where we're at right now. Our academic senate has, as we mentioned, said, we will define pathways as programs. So our next step in the process is to redesign our program review. And the advice that we have for others is definitely to have a lot of dialogue, because even though we've talked about this pathways as programs and this structure organization for a while, there has been some confusion about whether we're just creating all new program reviews or creating program learning outcomes. And so having a better, really good information about this is step one, it's just this thing. And then step two won't even begin until, 6 months, a year out. Having that available for everybody on the front end can help individuals sort of track with it, because when we're talking about this stuff and we're buried in guided pathways, as so many of us are, you feel like it's just common knowledge among everybody on campus. And so having things written down in such a way to capture as many of the people who may not have been totally engaged, or who may not have been totally engaged in all the dialogue would have been helpful. So, and I think Jane and Crystal have more things to add to this.
And I think the biggest one for us was that to say it was okay to start over. We, at least on the non-instructional side, the pathways of interest was working for us, right? We were able to give that information to the student, the advising was going okay. But when we started having these conversations in Senate, like a light bulb went off, like, oh, instructional faculty aren't using this? Like what? And when we could say, this is how we could all use it, and then take this to go on to our student success teams and our future plans, it really, I think, got much more campus buy-in for us.
And I think there's multiple times throughout this process where we started over again because we saw the 2.0 version, the 3.0 version, and so on, that it's going to help our institution and help our students, and help clarify things for students if we do it this way, and that's okay. It's only made it stronger and improved our programs. There's a question in here. As a small college, what's the average class size cap, and has that played a role in equity discussions? So, Melanie, do you want to?
Our class cap, our classes are really small. Most of our classes are capped at 30. And so I'm not sure if I probably need to get a little bit more information. Whoever asked the question, if you want to come on and we can talk about it, because I want to understand a little bit more about the question related to class size.
Sabrina Jimenez, are you there? And so, well, as far as equity discussions, if this is related to classes, our average class size, we don't have large lecture rooms or anything like that. Our classes are generally small. And that's the great thing about being at a small campus. I think you can have these honest dialogues within the classrooms and within each of our sections. And so that is a big thing that we are working on, that we have these discussions and have honest conversations and have dialogues about equity, about students, about meeting the students where they're at, having cultural competence within the class setting, and sensitivity. And so that is something institution-wide that is a mission for us.
And I can add on the idea of, placing our program areas into pathways where the work of the practitioners culminates in a broad-based discussion about our students and about disproportionate impact data and about general equity concerns for our campus. It's really exciting because we do have small classes and we do have some small programs. So it's going to create an opportunity for people to collaborate more and to tease out a lot more of the improvement that we would want to do, that maybe in a larger school, that might have happened because you have 5 or 10 or who knows how many full-time faculty in a single discipline having those conversations. And the pathways for us are going to allow us to bring multiple faculty together to have those conversations and to make plans for improvement. So I can tie it into class size that way, because it provides a broader base for us to have those conversations.
I think that is Sabrina's audio is not working. So.
Oh, okay. Are there any other questions or anything we can clarify?
Okay, I think that we are ending early. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And yes, if there are any questions further, I'm going to put my email on the chat. Please let us know.
Yeah, and we'll hang out if anybody wants to chat, and you have some questions and you want to visit, that's fine. Kind of like in the old days when people leave the room and a few people wait around.
All right, great. Thank you
everybody
so much.